All right, get ready to dive into some pretty huge cosmic questions today. Like, is there a reset button for the universe? What about these mind-boggling cosmic wipeouts everyone is talking about? The ones that could totally rewrite everything we think we know about, well, existence.
Yeah, and you've sent us some seriously fascinating stuff to dig into for this deep dive. Academic papers, some on cosmology, others on quantum physics, and then there's these really captivating stories of lost continents like Mu and Lemuria.
Yeah, it's going to be wild to see if there's actually any connection between all of this.
Absolutely.
So we've got the Big Bang Theory, right? But some of these sources are suggesting that maybe it wasn't a one-time thing. This idea of a cyclic universe, like with a big bounce instead of just one single bang that really kind of shakes things up, doesn't it?
It really does. Imagine a universe that's constantly expanding and contracting, kind of like breathing in and out.
Oh, wow.
These new cosmological models are pushing the boundaries of what we thought we knew, suggesting that the universe might not have a beginning or an end at all, just this constant cycle.
So instead of a straight timeline, it's more like a cosmic yo-yo. That's really cool, but wouldn't there still have to be a starting point, like that very first spark to kick off the whole cycle?
Yeah, that's the tricky part. Even with these cyclic models, there's still this concept of a singularity, that infinitely dense point that existed before the Big Bang. It seems like we can't really get around that. We might be pushing the mystery of how the universe began further back in time, but we aren't really solving it.
It's like peeling an onion and finding another onion underneath. But while we're on the subject of mysteries, let's talk about those mind-bending theories in quantum physics. Some of what we got suggests that just by observing something, we might actually be shaping reality, at least on a subatomic level.
Right, and that's where this idea of agential realism comes in. It's basically saying that we can't separate ourselves, the observers, from what we observe.
Yeah.
At the quantum level, just the act of measuring, of observing something, could actually change a particle's properties. It really challenges the traditional idea that there's a totally objective reality out there that exists independently of us.
So you're saying reality might be more subjective than we thought? It's almost like our consciousness helps create the world around us. That's a pretty wild thought.
It definitely challenges our conventional understanding of physics and the nature of reality. There's this idea of weak objectivity, meaning there might be an objective universe out there, but our perception of it, how we understand it, is always going to be colored by our own perspective and how we're observing it.
And that actually makes me think about all these stories about lost continents like Mu and Lemuria. Even though there's not a ton of scientific evidence to support them, they still really capture people's imaginations.
Yeah.
Maybe these stories, even if they're not literally true, are pointing to this idea that our understanding of reality is constantly evolving and changing.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting connection. The stories of Mu and Lemuria, they're considered more myth than history, at least by mainstream science, but they definitely tap into this very human desire to connect with a past that's full of mystery.
They're almost like cultural echoes, little hints of a past we've forgotten. And what's so interesting is that these accounts often describe civilizations that had technology way more advanced than ours, using crystals and sound in ways that seem almost impossible.
Right. They talk about societies harnessing energy in ways we can barely imagine, communicating telepathically, even interacting with beings from other planets.
Whoa.
It makes you wonder, are these just fantasies, or could they be distorted memories of a reality that existed before some kind of cosmic reset happened?
Okay, now that's a question I want to unpack. We're starting to see some intriguing parallels between all these seemingly different ideas.
Definitely. The idea of a cyclic universe with these periods of destruction and renewal lines up really well with these stories about advanced civilizations that rise and then fall, and all their knowledge and technology is lost to time, only to be rediscovered or maybe even reinvented in a new cycle.
So maybe those old legends, even if they're not literally true, maybe they hold some truth about how cyclical existence really is.
It's definitely possible. And it opens up a whole new set of questions. If these cosmic wipeouts are real, what happens to information, to knowledge during those cycles? Is everything completely lost, or does something carry over, some echo of what came before?
And where do we fit into all of this? As humans, I mean. Where do we belong in this huge cosmic cycle of death and rebirth?
Those are exactly the kinds of questions we'll be tackling as we dig deeper into this treasure trove of sources you've given us. Get ready, because this deep dive is about to get even more mind-bending. You know what's really interesting? This idea of a firmament. that keeps coming up in these stories of lost civilizations, especially with Mu. It pops up in those old texts, even interpretations of the Bible.
Yeah, I was reading about that. It's not just like a dome over the Earth, right?
Right, it's more like a crystalline shell surrounding the planet.
Yeah, that's a wild idea.
Totally. And some people even think this firmament wasn't just a barrier, but actually did something. Like it regulated Earth's climate and energy, almost like some kind of giant energy field.
That's crazy. But it kind of makes sense when you think about how Moose supposedly used super advanced technology, especially with crystals. Like they weren't just messing around with crystals for fun, they were harnessing their power for energy, and on a scale we can't even fathom.
Exactly. It really makes you wonder if maybe they understood something about crystals that we've totally missed. Like, what if they knew how to use crystals to manipulate energy in ways we haven't even dreamed of?
I mean, it's not totally out there. Think about it. Today, we're just starting to understand how to work with materials at the nanoscale. It's like, what if these ancient civilizations somehow knew things about science that we're only just rediscovering now?
Right. Maybe they tapped into energy sources or technologies based on principles we haven't even figured out yet.
Okay, so what exactly did these sources say about Mu's technology? What could they do?
Well, the accounts get pretty wild. They talk about Mu using sound and crystals to control energy, building these massive structures that were aligned with the stars, which suggests they knew a lot about astronomy. And maybe the most interesting part is that they supposedly had mastered telepathic communication.
Wait, telepathy? That sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie.
It does, right. But it's interesting to think about how that might actually connect to what we're learning about quantum physics. Quantum entanglement shows us that particles can be linked across huge distances, their states are connected no matter how far apart they are. What if consciousness works in a similar way somehow?
Whoa. So you're saying those telepathy stories might not be so crazy after all. What if Mu actually figured out how to use those quantum connections?
This is a pretty cool thought, right? And it raises the question, could these ancient stories, even if they've been exaggerated over time, be like distorted echoes of actual scientific principles that were once understood but then got lost, maybe during a cosmic reset?
It makes you wonder what other incredible knowledge might have been lost just waiting for us to rediscover it.
Exactly. And speaking of lost knowledge, let's talk about this idea of Mu being the motherland of all civilizations. It's something that Colonel James Churchward really popularized in his research. He claimed to have studied these ancient tablets that described Mu as this huge continent in the Pacific Ocean where all human civilization began.
But doesn't mainstream science say Mu didn't exist? I mean, if a continent that big sank, wouldn't there be some pretty obvious geological evidence?
That's true. Geologically speaking, there's no sign of Mu. But some people argue that the similarities in ancient cultures around the world, like their architecture, mythology, even their languages, point to a common origin. They also talk about archaeological discoveries that don't fit with the conventional timeline, suggesting that advanced civilizations existed way earlier than we thought.
So maybe there's a grain of truth in these stories. Like maybe there was a real ancient civilization that was really advanced, but the details got blown out of proportion over time. Instead of a massive continent, maybe it was a smaller group of islands or something.
It's definitely a possibility. And it ties back into this whole idea of civilizations rising and falling in cycles. What if incredible cultures have popped up and disappeared over and over throughout history, their knowledge and achievements lost, only to be rediscovered or reinvented generations later? Maybe the stories of Mu, Atlantis, and all these other lost civilizations are just echoes of this cyclical pattern passed down through myths and legends.
This has all reminded me of those mind-bending ideas in quantum physics we talked about before. Is there anything in those theories that could support these concepts of lost civilizations or cyclic universes?
Well, quantum physics doesn't directly prove those things, but it does challenge our traditional understanding of time and reality. It suggests that the universe is way more complex and interconnected than we originally thought.
So you're saying things might not be as fixed and linear as we perceive them to be?
Exactly. Take quantum superposition, for example. A particle can exist in multiple states at the same time. And then there's retrocausality, where something happening in the future can actually affect the past. These ideas kind of mess with our understanding of cause and effect, past, present, and future.
Hold on, retrocausality. Are you saying the future could influence the past? So like time travel?
Not exactly time travel like in the movies. But retrocausality suggests that time might not be a straight line, like an arrow going only one way. Some physicists are researching these ideas, and while we haven't figured out time travel yet, quantum physics definitely challenges our traditional understanding of time.
So if time isn't as rigid as we thought, could that explain some of the things that seem impossible about these ancient civilizations, like technology we can't even understand, or maybe even some kind of connection to the future?
It's definitely a fascinating thought. What if these ancient legends aren't just echoes of the past, but glimpses into a future that's somehow connected to our present?
Okay, my brain is officially melting. So how do we even start to tell what's real and what's not? Science from speculation. It seems like the lines get blurry when we're talking about this stuff.
And that's what makes it so exciting. We need to approach these topics with a sense of wonder, but also be a little skeptical. We shouldn't dismiss ideas that challenge our understanding, but we also need to look for evidence and be open to different interpretations.
So it's not just about finding a reset button for the universe. It's about finding a whole new way of understanding it. One that combines scientific thinking with a sense of wonder, the logical and the intuitive.
Absolutely. And in that search, we might just discover something truly amazing, something that changes how we see our place in the cosmos, and even the very nature of reality itself.
All right, listeners, get ready for the final stretch. We're about to head into some even wilder territory, exploring ancient prophecies, groundbreaking scientific discoveries, and the possibility that the universe is far stranger and more amazing than we ever imagined. So we've been talking about these cosmic wipeouts and cyclic universes, but it's not just, modern science that's thinking about these ideas. Lots of ancient cultures had their own versions of cyclical time too, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's pretty amazing how many indigenous traditions see time as a circle, not a straight line, like this constant cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. It's a huge part of how they understand the universe, their rituals, their whole lives, really.
Yeah, it makes me think about the seasons changing, how they always come back around, but it's always a little different. Are we just talking about things repeating over and over, though, or is there something deeper going on?
It's not just repetition, it's more like the universe goes through these distinct phases, each with its own energy, its own challenges. Like the Mayan calendar, for example, with all its complex cycles and long counts. It shows this belief in repeating eras, like chapters in a huge cosmic story.
So maybe these cycles aren't random, but like opportunities for growth, evolution, even a spiritual reset for the universe.
Exactly. And that kind of leads us to all those apocalyptic predictions throughout history. Are they talking about the actual end of the world or just the end of a chapter, the closing of one cosmic cycle and the start of a new one?
It's a question that people have been asking forever. Some people interpret ancient prophecies as these catastrophic events, like huge global upheavals that signal the end of an era, but others see them more symbolically, as a big shift in consciousness, moving from one age to the next.
Right, it doesn't have to be about physical destruction, but a deep change, getting rid of old ways and giving birth to something new. And even in science, we see this pattern of huge changes that lead to new life, new complexity. Think about extinction events. They wiped out tons of species, but they also opened up the way for evolution to take a new path.
So maybe these cosmic resets, these cycles of destruction and renewal, maybe they aren't something to be scared of, but a natural part of how the universe evolves, like a necessary step for growth and transformation.
That's a really powerful way to think about it. It reminds us that change is going to happen no matter what. Even when things end, there's always the potential for a new beginning.
Okay, so let's think about what all this means for us. How do we live in a reality where the universe might be on a giant reset button?
I think it encourages us to think differently about time, about change, about our own mortality even. If the universe itself goes through cycles of death and rebirth, maybe we should try to embrace those cycles in our own lives too.
So instead of being afraid of the end, we could see it as a chance to change, to let go of the things that aren't working anymore, a chance to embrace new possibilities and start fresh. And maybe even create something beautiful from what's left behind.
Exactly. And it also makes us think about what we want to bring with us into the next cycle. What knowledge, what values, what dreams do we want to hold on to and share?
So maybe these ancient stories and scientific theories aren't just about the past or the future. Maybe they're about us, right here, right now, and the choices we make as individuals and as a species.
Maybe it's a call to action, an invitation to become more aware, more involved in how the universe evolves, to not just go along for the ride, but to help shape things, to create a future that's in line with our greatest hopes and dreams.
That's a really inspiring thought. Well, listeners, that's it for our deep dive into cosmic wipeouts, cyclic universes, and whether there's a reset button for the whole universe. It's been a wild ride exploring these mind-blowing ideas, from the Big Bounce to quantum entanglement, ancient prophecies to lost civilizations.
It's been a pleasure exploring all of this with you. And remember, the journey doesn't stop here. Keep asking questions, keep searching, keep imagining all the incredible possibilities hidden in the vastness of the cosmos.